this bigger. Okay. All right. So do they have any common interests? Were there what are called compatible issues? Issues in which they want the exact same thing, which is good, and that often exists. Yes. In this case, both parties wanted a turnkey operation, one that was really ready to go, versus having to reconfigure the plant, and they both wanted the workforces intact, or the workforce intact. So even though negotiations are considered integrative or distributive by their very structure, there is such thing as compatible issues in which both parties want the same thing. In this case, there were two of them. Now, what is BioPharm's what's called BATNA? A BATNA is a best available alternative to a negotiated agreement. And essentially what this is, some people have asked, is that your opportunity cost? Yes, in different words, yes. But it basically says, what are you going to do? What's your best alternative if you don't go through with this deal? And so I would want you, if I gave you an exam, to know this term right here, at least BATNA, but ideally you would know what the acronym stands for. So BioPharm's BATNA, if they don't buy this plant, is to actually build a plant. And it's going to cost them $25 million, not great. Plus, for each month that it takes, it's going to take 12 months. For each month, they're going to lose $12 million in lost sales, and they have to train their workforce. So in total, we're talking about $37 million of an alternative that they're going to have to pay for. So what is BioPharm's what's called reservation point? The reservation point, or what's called a resistance point, which is something else I would want you to know, is what's called the walk-away agreement. Okay, so at what point, it's their bottom line, at what point are they going to walk away from this deal? And they would actually take a deal that's frankly better than $37 million. So as long as they incur fewer expenses or a lower sales price than $37-ish million, and it could be frankly $40 million, because $25 million to build the plant and $12 million in lost sales equals 37, but that doesn't even include the cost of training the workforce. So let's say it's somewhere around 37. Notice that there's a high correlation between the point at which BioPharm will walk away and a company's actual BATNA. Keep that in mind. That's very important. So they will be willing to take $37 million or less. Now, what's Celtec's BATNA? They don't have a very good BATNA either. It would cost them $3 million to reconfigure the plant for general manufacturing, at which point it would be worth $10 million, okay? So when we think about their reservation point, what is the minimum that they, as a seller, would be willing to take? Well, if they could sell it for $10 million, but it cost them $3 million to get there, it's $7 million. So $7 million or better, they will take. And again, that's based on Celtec's BATNA, which is, okay, so BATNA, we'll just write this in there. Oops. BATNA is not very good. And frankly, BioPharm's BATNA is not very good. And you'll notice what this means is, so our deal, which is going to be called what's called the ZOPA, and I'll explain that in a minute, will be somewhere between the $7 million, which is the minimum that Celtec will take, and the maximum that BioPharm will pay. So it's called the ZOPA. ZOPA equals the zone of possible agreement, okay? Alternatively called the bargaining zone. In this case, it's between $7 million and $37 million. And when you think about that, that's pretty wide. That allows for quite a few actual outcomes, which we'll get to in just a minute. Okay, so here hypothetically, so what is BioPharm Celtec? If you were the buyer, what should your target be? That is your aspiration. What do you want to buy this for at the best moment? So BioPharm's target should be, now ethics aside, $7 million. That is if they knew how bad Celtec's BATNA is, because Celtec doesn't have a very good BATNA. Now, one challenge in a negotiation is, can you figure out what somebody's BATNA is? If you are shrewd and you can fish for somebody's BATNA and they'll give it to you, it's the best thing that ever happened to you. So as an example, if BioPharm said, Celtec, what are you going to do if you don't sell this to us? And Celtec said, oh, We have no other buyers. This has been miserable. We're actually going to have to reconfigure the plant. It's going to cost $3 million, and then it'll be worth $10 million. Then BioPharm can say, oh, this is the best thing I've ever done in my life, and anything that I pay over $7 million is a windfall for them, and a windfall for me because I got such a good deal. The problem is, of course, many people will not actually give that up. That is, if they're a strong negotiator. However, it never hurts in a negotiation to say, hey, what are you going to do if you don't do this with me? If somebody would give it up, it's the best thing you've ever done. Now, what about Celtec's target? Ideally, their target will be $37 million. They want to sell this for as much as possible, and if they knew how bad BioPharm's situation is, they could extract a lot of money out of them. The question is, again, is BioPharm willing to say, we really don't have another great option. We have to build a plant. It's going to be very expensive, and we lose a lot of money as well. Unlikely that they would give that up. But note, that should be what's called the target. A resistance point is the point at which you're going to walk away, resistance point, or what's called the reservation point. A target is alternatively called somebody's aspiration. That is what they would like to have in an ideal world. Now, what most of the time happens, because people aren't willing to give up their BATNAs, is that you use the commonly held information. So if you remember, there were 3 bits of information in there. $8 million for the insurance policy, $16 million for declined market, and $12-ish mil for the book value of the plant. Okay, so those were the commonly held information around which most of the discussion lingers. And that's really not surprising because these each represent the possibility for what are called objective standards. Okay, in a negotiation, when determining the value of something, you ideally are trying to appeal to an objective standard. So let me give you an example. If you're trying to figure out the value of your car and you want a good deal, we all know that the most objective standard out there is Kelley Blue Book value. More often than not, when you're selling your house, the appraiser determines its market value by considering comps or other sales prices in your particular area. So those are considered objective to the degree that they're outside of the minds of any particular individual, and they can appeal as value. Now, people have standards all the time to which they appeal in negotiation. So, for example, say you and your significant other are trying to figure out who's going to take out the trash every night, and maybe the standard to which you appeal is fairness. So you say, well, I do all the dishes every night, so I think it's only fair that you take out the trash. So there are all sorts of standards to which you could appeal. Fairness, reciprocity, precedent, like a legal precedent, but you ideally want to get objective standards. So the key here is people, it's called egocentrism. People are more in touch with their own preferences than they are other people's. So BioPharm will want the plant to be worth in value $8 million. So most biofarmers, if they're smart, go to, well, you know, you only insured this for $8 million if something happens to it. So really, I think that's the value of the plant. And Celtec, to go off the screen here, will want the plant to be worth at least $16 million because that is the declined market value. But it's in their favor so that they can get a higher price. Now, to be sure, some people have negotiated higher than $16 million. I think that's very impressive when they do, and they usually appeal to the fact that this particular plant, if this is Celtec appeals to BioPharm by saying this is a very particular plant, you need it for a particular manufacturing configuration, and thus, even though the market seemingly would bear $16 million if the property were sold, this is worth more to you than that. I commend you because that's very persuasive in an argument. And you need, as managers, as potential managers through life, to be persuasive. And then lastly is the 12-ish million for the book value of the plant. And people go to that sometimes, it depends on who it is. And to be sure, you know, you can make an argument for it. Most people who recognize accounting recognize that book value is very often just something for tax purposes, depreciation. So it's more